Hello and welcome to Tank and AFV News. My name's Tom and we're looking at models again. So last week I did a video on 172 scale models that I'd bought in the last year and seemed to get a pretty positive response. I think people found it interesting. So I thought I'd start going through the model collection and showcasing other 172 scale stuff. Today we're going to be looking at the German World War II Tiger, so one of the most famous tanks in the world. I've got 6 models here representing different versions of the Tiger or vehicles that are based on the Tiger or sort of Tiger adjacent in terms of these last two. These are all pre-built. These are not kits that I built myself. The majority of stuff in my collection is stuff that I buy pre-built. And with Tigers, there's a lot of options. It's such a popular topic for model builders. For a tank that was produced in such relatively small numbers during the war, production of Tiger tank models and replicas post-war probably dwarfs all other models of tanks. With the possible exception of maybe Shermans. It's hard to say, but the Tigers, as far as capturing the public imagination, did a fantastic job of that. Obviously a controversial vehicle. I think a lot of people have different opinions about it. Without getting into that, I still think it's a fascinating vehicle. It's one of the most interesting tanks of World War II, and that is why I have models of it. Also because, like I said, the models here, these are some of the earliest ones I ever bought, partly because you start looking and there's plenty of options for Tigers, and they're usually, because there are so many, reasonably cheap. So it's a good place to start if you're starting a collection. So we'll start with this first one. This one is from Dragon, and this is a really nice quality. For 172 scale pre-built stuff, this one is about as good as you're going to get. The gun's got a limited amount of elevation, turns smoothly. It feels, it's got some weight to it, so it's definitely like this turret, especially. It's die cast. This is a very early model Tiger, and it's got the early features, which is the early suspension and wheels. It's got the early style commander's cupola. It's got the smoke dispenser thingies on the sides of the turret. It's got these things on the back, which were for the for the snorkels for wading rivers. The large muzzle brake, although that's all the detail, it's really hard to tell in the scale. And if you look really closely, it's got the 2 holes on the right hand side of the mantlet here, which the later ones, one of those holes was eliminated as they just switched stuff around. So this would represent sort of the very early Tigers. So this is similar to like Tiger 131 that's at the British Museum in Bovington. Now, whether or not this one would have had the early HL 210 engine rather than most of the Tigers had the later HL 230, obviously you can't tell from a model kit. But it's worth pointing out that there was a difference. So this is, like I say, a nice rendition. The color scheme is a little weird. I'm not an expert on German painting techniques, but this sort of, it's almost like a darkish greenish gray with the yellow, the Dunkelgelb sort of used on top. So I don't know if it's supposed to be a transitional pattern where they're sort of transitioning from the gray to the later scheme where they're using the yellows and browns and greens more. But I will leave that. I'm sure there are people that in the comments will comment. But I am not a. It's part of the reason I'm not a very good model builder is because I just don't really care that much about color schemes. This next one is this is an all plastic one. This is from Easy Model, and these are a brand that I like because they are quality's decent, not quite as good as some of the others, but they are usually very inexpensive. And they really have the feel, it's almost like somebody just did a really good job assembling one of the plastic kits. But this one would represent sort of a slightly later model Tiger. The biggest difference between this one and what we just saw is this has got the later style commander's cupola. It's more like the ones that are on the Panther. The early cupola was found to, if it got hit by a strong impact like a shell or whatever, it would get removed right off the vehicle and could take the commander's head or torso with it. So that's a change they made. This one does not have those smoke dispensers. It does not have the snorkels, because those features are all dropped. It's got the single hole on the mantlet. It does have the larger style muzzle brake, and the earlier style suspension. So this would be sort of more like in 1943 what you're going to see on the battlefield. The paint scheme on this one, again, it's like a lightish blue with green. Again, not really what I would expect. My limited knowledge of German paint schemes, but you know, oh well, it looks cool. So that's Easy Model. Then this last one is from Forces of Valar, and this was one. This is interesting. This is actually one of the very first, the beginning of my collection period. I'd found this at it's about 10 years ago, and I was on a date with the woman who's now my wife. At that point, we were still fairly early in the relationship, and we were at the local Meijer. Meijer, for those not from the Michigan area, is sort of our local version of Walmart. And in the discount section, they had this and a King Tiger and a Sherman all marked down to like $6 in the discount section. And I was looking at it, and she sort of looked at me and she's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm just looking at something I would have really liked as a kid." And she's like, "You know, if you want to buy it," she's like, "I don't care. I'm not going to judge." So, you know, I married her because why not? And that's how my collection started. This one, it's heavy. It's die cast. This represents a very late production Tiger one. Forces of Valar are okay if you get them at a decent price. I find the detail in 172 scale is a little less precise than some of the others, and part of it is because I think because they are mostly die cast, the precision's not as good as the plastic, frankly. The differences between this and the other thing is the suspensions on some of the Forces of Valor stuff and just the vehicles in general are just a touch out of scale or out of proportion. It's weird. So like the road wheels on this one I think are just a little too small. These would be the later model suspension. Later on they changed the Tiger suspension so that the wheels are more similar to the ones on the Tiger 2. And they eliminated the outer set of wheels. So this one is it's a slightly simpler system. It uses a lot less rubber than the earlier versions, I think was the main goal of it. It has, it's sort of hard to see, but the muzzle brake is a little smaller. It's, I believe they started using the same muzzle brake as what was on the Tiger 2 in these late production Tigers. That's sort of what, and of course it's got the late model Commander's cupola. So that's sort of what identifies it. It's got they've reproduced the Zimmerit, which is nice, and the colors are much more traditional, what you consider for a late war German tank, in that it's got the base, the dark yellow with green and brown on top of it. All in all, decent. Like I said, not perfect. One other thing about the Force of Valor, the tracks are just very, like, they're almost shiny, which they haven't done anything to, you know, some of these other models you can see, like on this one, where they've made the effort to put a little paint on them to make them look not so shiny, like more realistic. So that's sort of the three Tigers, and you know the funny thing is I bought these all basically because they were cheap, and it sort of turned out that they represented sort of three different eras in Tiger production, which is nice. Although, like I said, you kind of have to know what you're looking for a little bit. It's not like the Tiger changed dramatically during its production run. It's, you know, essentially the capabilities of the vehicle didn't really change all that much. The next three here we have, of course, the Sturm Tiger. This was a very limited production vehicle. It's a, you can call it an assault gun. I'd really almost say it's more of an artillery piece because this is such a specialized weapon. It has to be used from relatively long range. Military History Visualized did a very good video on it recently. About how these were used or how they were supposed to be used. I have fairly strong opinions on this vehicle. I think this is a complete waste of resources and time. It's essentially a large rocket launcher that you've mounted on your most expensive tank chassis. You don't need to use this fancy and expensive chassis for carrying around a rocket launcher, which is essentially what this gun is. It's not a gun in the traditional sense. It's what is it, 380 millimeter, I think, naval rocket. I mean, you can't see it in the video, but in this model they do a pretty good job of reproducing the little like little tiny exhaust holes that go around the main barrel. Elevates nicely. This one's Dragon, which generally pretty high quality stuff. And you can see the wheels. These are all based on the later chassis with those more like Tiger 2 style road wheels. This is a better representation of those wheels than on that Forces of Valar model, although they're also the only part of this vehicle that seems like they're like the raw plastic. They're really shiny, which is kind of annoying. It's the only annoying part about this one. Otherwise, it looks really sharp. But yeah, the Germans didn't produce a lot of these. They weren't used very often, and you know, it's just sort of the Germans taking an idea to the extreme, to where it's not even practical anymore. Yes, it's powerful, but the amount of resources that go into it for what you get is kind of silly. These last two are not really Tigers in the sense that all these other ones are based on the standard Tiger produced by Henschel. These are the Porsche Tigers. This one here is Dragon. This is a very nicely done model. So of course, Porsche's Tiger prototype lost the competition and was not adopted for service, but he had produced some. And at least one of these did get issued and sent out to the Eastern Front to serve as a command tank for a Ferdinand battalion. So this one is meant, I believe, is probably painted up to represent that one Porsche Tiger that was sent out to actually in combat. It's an ugly vehicle. There's no two ways about it. It's just a weird looking thing. Obviously, the turret's the same as what would be on the Henkel Tiger, because of course that was designed by Krupp. Although this particular one, they've got a Panzer IV storage bin on the back. That's what you see in the pictures. I'm not sure why that happened. It just, for whatever reasons, that's what they must have had, so they put it on there. And it's very different than the other Tigers. Of course, it's got Porsche's sort of gasoline electric system. It's all mounted in the rear of the hull. The turret's shoved way forward, unlike most German tanks. And the suspension is a torsion bar bogie system, which, you know, just saying that, it's like, wait, it's usually one or the other, but he managed to put torsion bars into a bogie system instead of running the torsion bars across the hull. Whether or not that's a good idea, I don't know, but he did it. And that's, again, Dragon, that's a very nice little quality model there too as well. And then, of course, this last one is a Forces. This is one of the nicest of the Forces of Valar ones, which is this is the Elephant. Early versions, of course, called the Ferdinand, unofficially, of course. You can tell this is the later one because it's got the whole machine gun, which was added. You know, if you read the sort of all the sort of traditional stories of Kursk, they say these got knocked out because Russian infantry were able to put bombs on them because they didn't have machine guns or some nonsense. That's not really true. But a nicely done one. Like they've recreated the Zimmerit nicely. The paint scheme looks good. The gun actually not only elevates but also goes side to side, which is nice. Just a good quality. The only problem that the gun's got just if you look at it really carefully, it sags just a little bit. Which is sort of a common problem with scale tanks of this size. But this one, like I said, is probably one of the nicest of the Forces of Valor that I have. So, so that's it. Tiger tank models. At another point, I'll probably do one on King Tiger and King Tiger based vehicles. But this is your Tiger 1 and Porsche Tiger stuff. So again, you got Dragon, you got Easy Model, Forces of Valor, Dragon, Forces of Valor. The Dragon stuff's probably the best in terms of overall detail and quality. The Forces of Valor stuff varies a little bit, and the Easy Model is quite affordable and decent, worth having in the collection. So hopefully for those that are looking to start your own collection or curious as to what's out there, there's tons of other Tigers out there. There's lots of different brands. I would say, you know, just be patient. You'll probably be able to get some of these better quality ones at relatively good prices than settling for a really junky one. So, because there are so many different versions of the Tiger that's been produced and that are out there, and I think a lot of vendors have them in their inventory, you know, trying to move them. So, like I said, I really like this Dragon one. This is one of my favorite models in my collection, as well as this one, just for the sheer weirdness of it. The Porsche vehicles are such oddball vehicles that you can't help but sort of be fascinated by them. All right, well, thank you much, and we will catch you on the next one.